In a busy downtown bank, a black woman quietly approaches the counter with her paycheck. The arrogant bank manager notices her, mocks her in front of staff and customers, and humiliates her with disbelief. Despite the insult, she responds with calm dignity, leaving the room shaken as a small but symbolic act hints that something much bigger is about to unfold. "We don't cash checks for people like you." The words cut through the bank lobby like glass shattering on marble. Heads turned. Phones stopped clicking. A brief silence spread through the spacious room, broken only by the low hum of the ceiling fans and the shuffle of waiting customers shifting in their seats. It was a Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago. The air inside the bank was cool, scented, faintly of leather chairs and disinfectant polish. Dozens of eyes now rested on the manager standing near the counter, a tall, clean-shaven white man in a crisp navy suit, his smile wide but dripping with arrogance. He leaned slightly forward, voice loud enough to make sure everyone heard the insult. Across from him stood a woman in her late 30s, black, dignified, dressed in a modest gray coat. Her braids were neatly tied back, and in her hands she held a folded check, the edges already softened from how many times she had looked at it. Her posture was calm, though her stillness carried weight, as if the whole room had paused with her. Some of the tellers glanced nervously at one another, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. A young trainee shifted uncomfortably but froze the moment the manager glanced his way. The authority in the manager's stance was unchallenged. He was used to this silence. "Excuse me?" The woman said softly, her voice steady, without anger. The manager smirked. "I said, we don't cash fake checks. And especially not ones that people like you bring in." He dragged out the last words with an almost theatrical sneer. A middle-aged customer in line chuckled under his breath, but most others looked down, pretending not to notice. The bank was a place of rules, silence, and transactions, not confrontation. The woman's eyes flicked to the check in her hand. The ink was bold, the signature unmistakable. She had worked long hours for it. It was her right. Yet here she was being told, in front of strangers, that her work, her identity, her presence was not enough. Her fingers tightened around the check. For a moment, she considered simply leaving. But something inside her refused. She took a step forward, sliding the check gently across the polished counter. "This is real, and you will see that," she said. The manager laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Oh, I've seen plenty like these, printed at home. Probably stolen." He held the paper between two fingers as though it were contaminated. Then, with a deliberate motion, he flicked it back at her, letting it flutter to the floor. The sound of paper against tile was louder than it should have been. The woman bent down slowly, picked it up, and smoothed it back into her hand. Her movements were calm, deliberate, almost ceremonial. When she rose, her eyes locked with his. "Do not mistake my silence for weakness," she said quietly, yet each word carried across the lobby like a bell. The room stiffened. Even the security guard near the door shifted uncomfortably, glancing. Between them, the manager's smirk faltered for half a second before returning. "If you don't like our service, you can leave. There are other banks. Maybe somewhere you'll fit in better." Her gaze did not waver. She reached into her purse, pulled out an ID card, and placed it flat on the counter. The card glinted under the fluorescent lights, an official seal catching the eye of anyone close enough to notice. The manager glanced down briefly, then scoffed without really looking. "An ID won't change the fact that this check is worthless." But, for a split second, his eyes had caught something, a seal, a title, a detail that unsettled him. He masked it quickly, clearing his throat and turning away as though uninterested. Yet those who had seen his reaction exchanged looks. The woman leaned in slightly. Her voice was calm but carried an edge like sharpened steel. "You will regret speaking to me this way." Her words were not shouted, not even bitter. They were simply certain. The bank fell into uneasy silence. Customers whispered, tellers froze, and even the clock on the wall seemed louder as its second hand ticked forward. Then, without another word, she picked up the check, slid her ID back into her purse, and turned. The click of her heels echoed against the marble floor as she walked slowly toward the exit. But just before the glass doors closed behind her, a distant sound pierced the morning calm. The low, rhythmic thud of approaching footsteps, heavier, more deliberate. And then the faintest flicker of red and blue light reflected on the bank's polished floor. The moment froze. The manager swallowed, suddenly unsure why his chest felt tight. The FBI was closer than anyone in that room realized. The glass doors closed with a soft hiss behind her, leaving a vacuum of silence in the bank's lobby. For a few seconds, no one moved. The faint clicking of the ceiling fan and the steady tick of the clock seemed louder than usual. Customers shifted uncomfortably in line. A young mother tugged her daughter closer, whispering something under her breath. An older man adjusted his glasses and looked at the manager with a sharp, questioning gaze. Even the tellers behind the counter exchanged uneasy glances, their hands hovering above keyboards but typing nothing. The arrogance on the manager's face remained, but the edges of his smirk were tighter now. His jaw flexed slightly as he turned back toward the crowd. "What are you all looking at?" he barked, his voice booming to reassert control. "Transaction window's still open. Let's keep moving." No one responded immediately. A customer coughed, a teller dropped a pen. But the energy had shifted. The woman's calm words still echoed in their ears. "Do not mistake my silence for weakness." The young trainee at the corner counter finally leaned closer to his colleague and whispered, "Did you see her ID?" His colleague nodded subtly, eyes still down, government seal, looked important. The trainee swallowed hard. She didn't seem like someone bluffing. The manager's head snapped toward them. "Something to share?" he demanded. Both tellers froze, muttering no. "Sir," in unison. The manager's smirk returned, forced, brittle. He adjusted his tie and turned toward his office door. But before he could step away, the muffled sound of heavy footsteps reverberated through the glass entrance. They weren't the casual steps of customers. They were measured, commanding. A pair of businessmen near the back of the lobby leaned toward each other. "Those sound like boots," one whispered. "Military?" "Or law enforcement," the other replied, his eyes widening. The security guard near the door stiffened, hand instinctively brushing the holster at his side before thinking better of it. He straightened his posture, eyes flicking nervously toward the manager. The manager waved dismissively. "Probably just construction outside. Don't let it distract you." His voice carried a tone of false certainty, as though he needed to convince himself more than anyone else. But then the sound grew clearer, leather solace, deliberate pacing, synchronized steps. The faint reflection of red and blue lights rippled against the marble floor once again, stronger now. Customers craned their necks, whispering in rising tones. "Is something happening?" A man in a business suit muttered to no one in particular. Woman clutched her purse tighter, leaning toward the stranger beside her. She said he'd regret it. "Remember?" "What if she—" "Quiet," hissed another, eyes darting toward the manager. The manager felt the weight of every glance. His arrogance had always been enough to silence a room, but today the silence belonged to someone else, the woman who had left, her dignity heavier than his insults. And now, with each approaching step, he felt his grip on the lobby weaken. He turned sharply toward the security guard. "Go check outside," he ordered. The guard hesitated. "Sir," If it's law enforcement, I said check. The guard swallowed, nodded once, and moved toward the door. But before his hand could reach the glass, the footsteps stopped. Dead silence. Then a shadow crossed the frosted glass panels of the entrance. Broad shoulders. Firm stance. More than. One figure. The customers closest to the door instinctively took a step back. The manager's throat tightened, though he forced a laugh. See? Just pedestrians. Nothing unusual. The glass door handle clicked. Every head in the lobby turned, but instead of swinging open immediately, the door stayed closed for a beat too long. As if whoever stood outside wanted to let the tension settle, wanted their presence felt before they revealed themselves. The manager adjusted his cufflinks, his palms sweating now, though he tried to hide it by fiddling with his watch. He turned, his back to the door, raising his voice again. Enough gawking. Everyone, back to your business. But no one moved, because at that moment, the unmistakable glint of a badge pressed faintly against the glass, catching the fluorescent light, a seal embossed in silver, a symbol that silenced even the whispers. The young trainee's mouth fell open. Oh my God. The manager spun around, his forced confidence faltering as his eyes caught the reflection. The silence was heavier now, not of fear, but of anticipation. Something irreversible was about to step into that bank, and every person in the lobby knew. The woman's calm warning was about to unfold. The glass doors burst open with a sharp metallic click, the sound echoing through the marble lobby like a gavel slamming in a courtroom. Cold air rushed in from the street, carrying with it the faint smell of exhaust and rain. 4 men entered. Dark suits, polished shoes, clean-cut hair. Their badges gleamed as they fell into the light. Each moved with the unhurried precision of men used to owning every room they walked into, and at that moment, they owned this one. Conversations died instantly. Phones slipped quietly back into pockets. Even the child clinging to her mother's coat stopped fidgeting. All eyes locked on the newcomers, their presence shifting the energy of the room from casual unease to trembling anticipation. At the front was a tall African-American agent, broad-shouldered, his expression stern but unreadable. He scanned the room in a slow sweep, pausing just long enough to make every soul in the lobby feel seen, measured, and judged. Behind him, 3 more agents followed, one carrying a slim leather folder, another speaking softly into an earpiece, and the last with sharp blue eyes that seemed to pierce through the marble walls themselves. The bank manager's mouth went dry. He stepped forward, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Gee, good morning, gentlemen. Can I help you with something? His voice cracked slightly, though he quickly cleared his throat. The lead agent ignored him at first, continuing his sweep of the room. His gaze passed over the customers, the tellers, the security guard frozen near the door. Finally, his eyes settled back on the manager. You're the branch manager? The agent asked, his voice deep, calm, and carrying a weight that didn't require volume to command attention. The manager straightened, tugging his jacket. That's right, Daniel Whitaker. I run this branch. Is there a problem? The agent didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, closing the distance until the manager had to tilt his head up slightly. Silence stretched, thick, and uncomfortable before the agent finally spoke. An incident was reported here just a few minutes ago. The words hit the room like a dropped stone in still water. Customers exchanged quick glances. The tellers froze. Everyone knew exactly what incident he meant. The manager forced a laugh. Oh, that. I assure you, it's nothing. Misunderstanding with a customer. These things happen. The second agent, the one with the folder, flipped it open casually. A misunderstanding? His tone was cool, skeptical. We received a direct call. described as harassment, possible discrimination. Gasps rippled through the lobby. The word discrimination lingered in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. The manager's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. People exaggerate. Customers get upset. You know how it is. I'm sure whoever called you. Her name, the lead agent interrupted, voice cutting through the air like a blade. What was her name? The manager blinked. Her name? I don't recall. You don't recall the name of the customer you just denied service to? The manager shifted on his feet, sweat prickling at the back of his neck. Look, I deal with dozens of people a day. Some aren't exactly trustworthy. You can't expect me to remember. Describe her. The agent said flatly. Silence. The customers looked at one another, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Everyone had seen her. Everyone could describe her. And yet the man who had mocked her, humiliated her, pretended as though she was invisible. The manager's forced grin twitched. She was just some woman. Dark coat. Nothing special. The lead agent's jaw tightened. He turned slightly, and for the first time since entering, his expression shifted, a flicker of disappointment. Not in the manager, but in the ugliness of something he had seen far too often. He glanced over his shoulder at the agent with the earpiece. A subtle nod. The agent murmured something quietly, his words vanishing into static. The bank's security guard finally spoke, his voice trembling. Sir, I think she left out the front doors just a few minutes before you arrived. The lead agent didn't look at him, but gave another faint nod. Then he leaned closer to the manager, lowering his voice just enough that the words were intimate, yet loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. She warned you, didn't she? The manager froze. The room seemed to lean forward collectively, everyone holding their breath. She told you, the agent continued, that you'd regret speaking to her the way you did. The blood drained from the manager's face. He stammered. I didn't mean anything by it. I was doing my job. She seemed suspicious. The lead agent straightened, his presence towering. Suspicious? He repeated. His voice was calm, but the word carried venom. The second agent closed the folder with a snap. The sound made the manager flinch. We'll need to see your office, the agent said. Now. The customers erupted in whispers. Some smirked in satisfaction. Others shook their heads, muttering about justice finally walking in. The manager's arrogance wavered, but he forced a stiff nod. Of course, this way. He turned toward his office, his steps heavy, each one dragging him deeper into a situation he could no longer control. Behind him, the agents followed, their polished shoes clicking like a verdict being delivered, and, for the first time, Daniel Whitaker, the man who laughed at a black woman's paycheck, felt the crushing weight of silence no longer working in his favor. The office door shut with a dull click, but the glass walls kept everything visible. The lobby outside was no longer a place of banking, it had become an audience. Customers leaned discreetly, tellers paused their work, even the security guard shifted for a better view. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the small room where the arrogant manager now stood trapped under a different authority. Daniel Whitaker tried to keep his composure. He moved behind his desk, gesturing toward the chairs opposite. Please, gentlemen, have a seat. I am sure we can clear this up quickly. The lead agent didn't move. He stood tall, arms crossed, eyes locked on the manager like a predator, measuring prey. The others remained standing as well, their silence filling the cramped space. Finally, one of them spoke. You denied service to a customer carrying a valid check. Why? Daniel's laugh was thin, brittle. I told you already. Suspicion. It looked fraudulent. We get them all the time. Part of my job is protecting the bank. The agent with the blue eyes leaned forward slightly. You called it fake before even verifying the account. That's, well, experience. I can tell. The signs. Experience, the lead agent repeated softly, his voice like stone grinding against stone. Or prejudice? Daniel's cheeks flushed. He straightened his tie, forcing another smile. Now hold on. I don't appreciate being accused of racism. I've been managing this branch for 8 years. I treat all my customers the same. Outside. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Customers exchanged glances, some scoffing, some shaking their heads. They had just witnessed otherwise. The agent with the folder opened it again, pulling out a document. The customer in question. Did you even ask for her name? Daniel hesitated, his throat tightening. I didn't have the chance. She became confrontational. Confrontational? The agent pressed. She was calm. Witnesses describe you raising your voice, mocking her. The word mocking hung in the air. Daniel swallowed. People exaggerate. You know how rumors— Enough, the lead agent cut in sharply. His voice cracked through the room like thunder. Daniel froze, his breath hitching. The agent stepped closer, lowering his tone, but his words carried weight. That woman gave you every chance to treat her with dignity. You laughed. You humiliated her. And now you sit here lying. Daniel's heart thumped against his ribs. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but nothing came out. For the first time, words failed him. The silence in the room stretched, pressing in on him from all sides. Outside, through the glass, customers whispered like spectators at a trial. They could see him sweating, fidgeting, collapsing inch by inch. The agent with the earpiece spoke quietly, his voice calm but piercing. You do realize who she is, don't you? Daniel blinked, his face pale. She's some woman. I don't. The lead agent's jaw tightened. He exchanged a look with his team. Then, without another word, he placed his badge flat on the desk, its silver seal glinting under the fluorescent lights. Daniel's eyes darted to it, then back to the agent's cold stare. What does this have to do with anything? The agent leaned forward until his voice was just above a whisper, though the tension carried it to every corner of the glass office. She's not just a customer. Daniel's stomach dropped. His hands trembled, though he quickly shoved them into his pockets to hide it. He forced a shaky laugh. Oh, come on. You're making this sound like some conspiracy. She brought in a check that looked suspicious. I did my job. The agent's eyes didn't blink. Your job is service, respect, verification. Instead, you chose humiliation. And the worst mistake of your career was assuming she was powerless. Daniel's forced smile collapsed entirely. The silence outside the glass grew heavier. Even. The youngest trainee teller stood frozen, his hands flat against the counter, his eyes wide. Customers leaned closer, their curiosity now replaced by something else, anticipation. Inside, Daniel's composure continued to crumble. He wiped at his forehead with a shaking hand, his tie suddenly too tight. Listen, he whispered harshly. If she works for someone important, then let's be reasonable. I can apologize. I'll even— You think this is about an apology? The agent interrupted, his tone sharp. Daniel flinched. The agent straightened, looming over the desk. This is about accountability, about consequences. The blue-eyed agent stepped forward, his gaze piercing. Do you even know whose name was signed on that check you tossed on the floor? Daniel's breath caught. His mind scrambled, but the truth pressed in with the weight of inevitability. He hadn't looked, not really. He'd seen only the woman's skin, not the ink. His lips parted. No sound came out. The agents exchanged another glance. Outside, the whispers grew louder. Something monumental was building, and everyone knew it. The lead agent turned back toward the glass walls, his voice carrying clearly for all to hear. This isn't just a misunderstanding. This is bigger. And everyone in this room is going to know exactly why. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. For the first time in his career, the glass walls of his office no longer made him look powerful. They made him look exposed. The silence was suffocating. Daniel Whitaker could feel every eye on him, pressing through the glass walls of his office like heat from a fire. His hands itched to straighten papers, to reach for something familiar. But the desk in front of him felt like a witness stand. The lead agent took a step closer, his shadow stretching across the polished surface. "You threw that check on the floor," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "Do you even know whose signature you treated like trash?" Daniel's mouth opened, but only air escaped. His throat was dry, his tongue heavy. The blue-eyed agent pulled a photocopy from the folder and laid it flat on the desk. The bold ink glared up at Daniel like a spotlight. The signature read, "Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Daniel's breath hitched audibly. His knees buckled slightly before he caught himself against the desk. Outside, the lobby erupted in whispers. Customers gasped. Tellers leaned forward. Even the security guard muttered a stunned, "Oh my God!" The lead agent's voice cut through the murmurs like steel. "That woman walked in here with a payroll check issued directly from the Bureau, signed by the Deputy Director himself. And you?" He jabbed a finger toward Daniel, his voice sharp now. "Mocked her. Called it fake. Laughed in her face." Daniel's chest tightened. His thoughts raced, colliding in chaos. He forced a weak laugh, the sound pitiful in the heavy silence. It must have been a mistake. Forgery. Anyone could. The blue-eyed agent's glare froze him mid-sentence. Forgery? You think someone can walk into a bank with federal clearance watermarks and a signature we authenticate ourselves? He leaned closer. That wasn't a forgery. That was as real as it gets. Daniel's world tilted. His ears rang. Outside, the whispers grew louder, circling like vultures. The lead agent leaned across the desk, lowering his voice though it carried through the glass. "Her name is Cassandra Holt, Senior Financial Analyst for the FBI's Countercrime Division. She's one of the people who make sure we get paid. She's respected, protected, and you humiliated her in front of a room full of witnesses." Daniel's legs weakened further. He sank into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. His once proud posture was gone. He looked small, cornered. "But I didn't know," he whispered. The agent's eyes hardened. "You didn't care to know." That landed heavier than any shout. Outside, the young trainee teller whispered to his colleague, "She was FBI. She works for them." His colleague shook her head slowly. "He just destroyed himself." Daniel's palms were sweating. He rubbed them against his trousers, but the moisture only spread. His voice cracked. "Gentlemen, listen. I admit I may have overreacted. A poor judgment call. But surely we don't need to escalate this. I can apologize. I'll even issue a public statement if that's what you want." The lead agent didn't blink. "You think this is about saving your reputation? About smoothing it over with words?" Daniel swallowed hard. "This is about accountability," the agent continued. "You didn't just insult a woman. You insulted an officer of the Bureau. You questioned her integrity, her work, and you tried to make her small in front of a room full of strangers." Daniel's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking now. I didn't mean." The blue-eyed agent leaned down, his words like ice. "Intent doesn't erase damage. You humiliated her because of the color of her skin. And now you're about to understand what it means to face consequences." Daniel felt the walls closing in. Every sound outside the office, the whisper of customers, The click of pens, the creak of chairs, amplified in his head. The lead agent finally turned, his gaze sweeping across the watching lobby. Everyone in this building saw what happened. Everyone knows the truth. And now, Mr. Whitaker, the Bureau knows too. Daniel's blood ran cold. The agent with the folder tucked the photocopy away, his voice calm but final. This isn't just a matter for your bank anymore. This is federal. The words hit harder than any slap. Outside, a man muttered, "Federal, he's finished." The manager's once commanding presence was gone entirely. His face glistened with sweat, his suit clung to him like a cage, and his eyes darted desperately between the agents as though searching for mercy that wasn't there. The lead agent leaned in once more, his final words for the moment sharp as, "A verdict. You mocked the wrong woman, Mr. Whitaker, and the consequences are only beginning." Daniel's stomach twisted, his mind screaming for escape, but his body sat frozen in the chair. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one in control. Daniel's breaths grew shallow, ragged. The office no longer felt like his own. The walls seemed smaller, the air thinner, the weight of the agent's stares unbearable. The lead agent paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. Each step was deliberate, a metronome counting down Daniel's unraveling. "You've been running this branch 8 years, the agent said quietly. "Tell me, in those 8 years, how many customers like Cassandra Holt have you dismissed?" Daniel swallowed. His tongue felt heavy. I don't lie." The agent's voice was calm but sharp enough to cut glass. Daniel's shoulders sagged. He rubbed the back of his neck. Look, sometimes you can just tell. When people don't belong, you have to protect the bank. I made calls. That's what managers do." The agent stopped pacing. His gaze burned through Daniel. "No, that's what racists do." The words landed like a hammer. Outside the office, several customers shifted uncomfortably, but none looked away. Every soul in that lobby wanted to witness this reckoning. Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, the blue-eyed agent placed another folder on the desk. "Do you know what Cassandra Holt was doing in this city?" Daniel shook his head weakly. "She wasn't here to cash a check for groceries." The agent continued, his tone steady. "She's been assigned to a federal task force investigating corruption in regional banks, payroll fraud, laundered accounts, dirty money." Daniel froze. His fingers twitched against the arm of his chair. The lead agent leaned in. "And she chose this branch for a reason." Outside, the whispers swelled again. The staff leaned forward, their faces pale, realizing the weight of what they were hearing. Daniel's heart pounded. His voice cracked. What are you saying? That she was testing me?" The agent's silence was louder than any answer. The blue-eyed agent flipped open the folder. Inside were photographs, blurred documents, highlighted names, arrows. Connecting transactions. He tapped one page. "This branch has flagged accounts linked to suspicious wire transfers. Cassandra Holt was verifying whether your branch was complicit." Daniel's body went cold. No, I don't." The lead agent's eyes narrowed. "And when she presented her federal paycheck, instead of doing your job, you humiliated her, laughed in her face, accused her of fraud." Daniel's lips trembled. "I didn't know. You didn't care to know," the agent cut in, repeating the damning line. Outside, the trainee teller whispered, "He just exposed himself." His colleague nodded, wide-eyed. Daniel's chest heaved. He felt his authority slipping further with every second. His office, once a throne, was now a transparent cage, and the crowd outside was watching his downfall like a spectacle. The agent, with the earpiece, stepped forward, speaking for the first time since entering. His voice was low but heavy. "You should understand, Whitaker. Cassandra Holt isn't just another analyst. She's directly connected to our financial crimes unit. You insulted someone who's been building a case, possibly against you." Daniel's stomach lurched. His mind spun, replaying every questionable transaction, every corner he'd cut, every dismissal of unimportant customers. Was she on to him? Was today meant to provoke this very reaction? He tried to speak, but his voice broke. I never touched anything illegal, I swear." "Whatever she thinks," the lead agent leaned closer, his face inches away. "You want to know the irony?" Daniel blinked rapidly, sweat dripping from his brow. "She didn't come here to arrest you. She came here to cash her paycheck. That's it, a simple task. And you showed us who you are without her saying a single word." The words tore through Daniel. The lobby outside was silent now, the kind of silence that follows a verdict. Customers looked on with mixed emotions, some with pity, most with satisfaction. The tellers sat stiff, their hands trembling above keyboards, realizing how fragile dignity could be in the face of arrogance. Daniel buried his face in his hands for a moment. His voice, muffled and broken, escaped. "Please, I didn't mean." The blue-eyed agent's voice was cold, merciless. "Intent doesn't matter. Impact does. And today, the impact of your arrogance was seen by everyone in this building." Daniel lifted his head slowly, his eyes red, his lips trembling. For the first time, he looked not like a manager, not even like a man in control, but like someone standing at the edge of ruin. The lead agent straightened, his voice steady. "You humiliated a federal officer. You attempted to delegitimize her authority. You undermined the Bureau." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Do you understand what that means?" Daniel's chest tightened painfully. His voice was a hoarse whisper. "It means, I'm finished." The agent didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. Outside, the crowd of customers watched through the glass, their faces reflecting. One truth: Daniel Whitaker, once untouchable, was watching his empire collapse, and he had built his own. Destruction with laughter. The tension in the bank had thickened into something tangible, a suffocating weight pressing down on everyone present. Daniel's face glistened with sweat, his once crisp shirt damp and wrinkled. His kingdom of polished floors and quiet order had turned into an open stage, and he the unwilling performer under a blinding spotlight. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the faint hum of the air conditioning and the muted shuffling of restless customers filled the silence. Then, from the crowd, a voice rose. "I know her pain." The words sliced through the stillness. Heads turned. A woman in her late 40s, dressed in a faded green work uniform, stepped forward. She held her purse tightly against her chest, her knuckles white with tension. The agents exchanged a quick glance as she walked up to the glass divider that separated the office from the lobby. Her voice trembled but carried a fire that demanded attention. 3 months ago, she began, staring directly at Daniel, I came here to deposit my paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And you, Mr. Whitaker, looked me dead in the eye and said it was probably fake. You laughed, right there, in front of everyone. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's head shot up, his mouth opening, closing, but no sound came out. The woman's eyes burned. Do you remember me? You told me I should get a real job instead of pretending to clean houses. I went home that day and cried until I couldn't breathe. My kids saw me. They asked me why the bank thought I was lying. A sharp, stinging silence followed. Even the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to stop. The lead agent's jaw tightened. He turned slowly toward Daniel. Pattern of behavior. He murmured, his voice ablade. The woman's lip trembled, but she straightened her shoulders with a courage born of years of humiliation. I stayed quiet. I thought no one would believe me. But now, her voice grew stronger. Now I see I wasn't the only one. Behind her, another hand rose. A young black man in a construction vest stepped forward. His boots tracked dust onto the spotless marble floor, but no one dared complain. He did it to me too, the man said, his voice steady. Told me my check was too big for someone like me. I had to bring my boss in to prove it was real. Lost half, day's pay just to get my money. Murmurs filled the lobby, louder this time. Customers looked at one another, nodding grimly. The walls of Daniel's authority cracked further with each testimony. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly. His hands gripped the arms of his chair like anchors, as though holding on tightly might stop the world from tilting beneath him. This is all a misunderstanding, he stammered, his voice weak, but the crowd drowned him out. One by one, more voices joined. A college student, a retired veteran, a mother clutching her toddler. Each had a story, a memory of humiliation within. These very walls. The agents listened, scribbling notes, their faces growing darker with each testimony. The lead agent finally raised a hand, silencing the crowd. He turned to Daniel. This isn't just one incident anymore. It's a record, a history. He leaned down, his eyes locked on Daniel's. Do you understand the difference? Daniel shook his head violently, his words tumbling in panic. No, they're exaggerating, twisting things, but the truth was undeniable. Every face in that lobby reflected the same pain, the same quiet shame that Daniel had dismissed as insignificant. And now, gathered together, their voices formed a tidal wave no denial could stop. Cassandra Holt, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, but it carried an authority that silenced even the murmurs. You built this place on intimidation, Mr. Whitaker, on belittling people you thought were powerless. But today you miscalculated. You picked the wrong person to dismiss, and in doing so, you revealed the truth, not just about yourself, but about what you've been doing here for years. Her words hung in the air like a gavel strike. Daniel's lips quivered. He wanted to fight back, to reclaim some shred of authority, but the weight of dozens of eyes crushed his defiance. He was no longer the manager, no longer the man in control. He was a defendant in his own court, his jury standing right outside his office door. The blue-eyed agent leaned close, his voice low but deadly. The Bureau doesn't just punish fraud, Whitaker. We punish patterns. You've built one hell of a pattern here. Daniel's breath caught. His vision blurred. His empire had collapsed, not with a bang, but with a chorus of voices that refused to be silenced anymore. And for the first time, he understood the crushing weight of witnesses. The lobby no longer felt like a bank. It had transformed into something far heavier, a courtroom without benches, a trial without robes. Every pair of eyes had fixed on Daniel Whitaker, the man who once walked with an air of untouchable authority. But now, stripped of his composure, Daniel sat hunched in his leather chair, his fingers trembling as they clutched the edges of his desk. The lead agent straightened, adjusting his tie before pulling a small recorder from his pocket. He pressed the red button, the click echoing louder than it should have in the tense silence. This is Special Agent Carter, he said, his tone sharp and official. We are documenting live testimonies regarding the repeated discriminatory actions committed by Daniel Whitaker, bank manager of this branch. Daniel's face paled. You can't do this here. This isn't. Agent Carter's eyes cut through him like glass. You don't get to decide that anymore. He gestured to the woman in the green uniform, who stepped forward nervously but resolutely. State your name and recount your experience, Carter instructed. She swallowed hard, then spoke. My name is Angela Morris, and 3 months ago, I came here to deposit my paycheck." As her voice filled the air, the agent's pen scratched across his notepad. Daniel shifted in his chair, each word hammering at the fragile wall of excuses he'd built around himself. When Angela finished, another witness stepped forward, then another. Their stories painted a damning mural of arrogance and cruelty. And, with each voice, Daniel's empire shrank smaller, until it was nothing more than an illusion. Now shattered. Cassandra stood silently near the corner, her arms folded. She wasn't smiling, wasn't gloating. Her expression was one of sorrow, as though she pitied the man who had once looked down on her with disdain. Finally, the construction worker, broad-shouldered, with dust still clinging to his vest, took his turn. His voice boomed, carrying across the marble floor. "This man told me my money didn't belong in his bank, that I should cash it somewhere else. Said people like me were always trying to cheat the system." A gasp swept through the lobby. Daniel's head sank into his hands. "Enough!" He suddenly roared, his voice cracking. He shot to his feet, his face twisted with rage and fear. "You people are all lying. You're conspiring against me because of her." He jabbed a trembling finger at Cassandra. "She's behind all of this. She brought the FBI here. She set this up." The outburst only sealed his fate. Agent Carter's gaze hardened. He stepped closer, towering over the trembling manager. "What I see is a man grasping at straws. What I hear is the sound of guilt, and what everyone here has witnessed," he turned to the crowd, "is the undeniable truth." A heavy silence followed. Then, one by one, the customers nodded. The employees too, some even looking relieved, as if a dark weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Daniel's breathing grew shallow. He looked around the room, desperate for an ally, but found only cold stares and hardened expressions. Even his own staff wouldn't meet his eyes. "This is ridiculous," Daniel muttered weakly. "I've given this bank my life. I've built its reputation." Angela's voice cut him off like a blade. "You built it on the backs of people. You humiliated." The words struck harder than any gavel. The second FBI agent, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Mr. Whitaker, we're placing a formal hold on your accounts and initiating a full audit of this branch. Effective immediately. You are under federal investigation for discrimination, abuse of authority, and obstruction." Daniel's knees buckled. He collapsed back into his chair as if the weight of the announcement had physically crushed him. His face turned gray, his eyes darting like a trapped animal searching for escape. Cassandra stepped forward at last. Her voice was calm, unshaken. "You thought laughing at me was harmless, but that laugh revealed everything about you. And now the truth is out." The words echoed through the silent lobby, final and unchallenged. For Daniel, there was no laughter left, only the crumbling of control, and the walls of his empire closing in. Daniel's office no longer looked like a sanctuary of power. Blinds still hung neatly, the mahogany desk still gleamed, and the brass nameplate still read Daniel Whitaker, branch manager. But none of it mattered now. The air was heavy, suffocating, thick with the weight of judgment. The FBI agents had spread files across the desk, customer complaints, sworn testimonies, even surveillance stills. Each document was a nail in the coffin of Daniel's career. "You don't have the authority to touch my files," Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. His once deep baritone now sounded shrill, panicked. He grabbed the papers, shoving them off the desk. They fluttered to the marble floor like feathers, evidence scattered in plain sight. Agent Carter didn't flinch. He simply bent down, picked up a page, and calmly slid it back into the folder. "Every document here is now part of a federal investigation, and every attempt you make to interfere is another charge against you." Daniel's chest heaved. He looked at the crowd gathered beyond the glass walls. Customers, employees, security guards, all pressing closer, their faces pale with disbelief. He could feel their stares cutting into him, stripping him of the pride he had once worn. Like armor. "I'll have your badges for this," Daniel hissed, slamming his palm on the desk. "My lawyers will bury you in court. I know people in this city, powerful people. You can't just walk in here and—" Carter stepped forward, close enough that Daniel had to lean back. His words were calm, surgical. "The difference between you and me, Mr. Whitaker, is that my authority comes from the law. Yours comes from fear. And fear doesn't hold up in federal court." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Cassandra, standing near the front, felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't smiling, but inside, a weight was lifting. For years, men like Daniel had laughed at women like her. But this was justice being carved into stone. The second agent, a tall woman with sharp eyes, produced a pair of handcuffs from her belt. The metallic click as she unfolded them rang through the lobby like a bell announcing Judgment Day. Daniel's eyes widened. Wait, no. You can't do this. Not in front of them. Not in front of everyone." His gaze darted toward his employees. Some looked away. Others watched with quiet satisfaction. "You brought this on yourself," the agent replied flatly. "No." Daniel cried, his voice cracking. "This is all her fault." He pointed at Cassandra, his hand trembling. "She set me up. She brought you here." Cassandra didn't move. Her expression remained steady, calm. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. The truth had already spoken louder than anything she could say. Agent Carter's patience snapped. "That's enough." He turned to the crowd. "You've all heard the testimonies. You've all seen the evidence. This man is no longer in control here." The tall agent stepped forward, gripping Daniel's arm. He recoiled violently, his voice shrill. "Don't touch me. I'm the manager of this bank. I have rights." The agent's reply was cold and final. "And now you have charges." The cuffs clamped around Daniel's wrists with a metallic snap. The sound was sharp, final. The sound of a career ending, of power collapsing. Gasps filled the room. Phones rose into the air as customers began recording, their cameras capturing the fall of a man who had once humiliated so many. Daniel struggled weakly, but it was no use. The agents hauled him to his feet. His suit, once immaculate, now looked rumpled. His tie hanging crooked as sweat dripped down his temples. His voice cracked as he pleaded. "Please, don't do this here. Not in front of them. I can explain. I can fix this." But no one moved to help him. Not one of his employees, not one of the customers, not even the guards he'd barked orders at for years. He was utterly alone. Cassandra took a slow breath as the reality of the moment settled in. For so long, Daniel's laugh had echoed in her ears, a sound meant to belittle her. But now, as the cuffs tightened around his wrists, the only sound was silence, heavy, powerful. Righteous silence. As the agents began walking Daniel out of the office, Carter's voice carried over the stunned lobby. "Daniel Whitaker, you are under arrest pending federal investigation. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The words landed like a gavel striking wood. Final. Irrevocable. Daniel's knees buckled, and the agents had to drag him toward the doors. He looked back one last time, his eyes locking with Cassandra's. For the first time, there was no arrogance, no laughter, only fear. And Cassandra, standing tall and steady, finally let out a breath she had been holding. Since the moment he laughed at her check, the gavel struck once, sharp and cold. "Court is now in session," the judge announced, his eyes sweeping across the packed room. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, and every seat was filled. The air buzzed with the kind of silence that was louder than any noise, the silence of anticipation. Daniel sat stiffly at the defense table, his once pristine suit now wrinkled. His smirk, the same arrogant curl of the lips he had worn that day in the bank, was nowhere to be found. Sweat dotted his forehead. He kept his eyes low, but Cassandra could feel his shame radiating across the room. She sat in the front row, calm, her back straight, her chin high. She wore the same quiet dignity she had carried into that bank when she was mocked. But now, instead of being dismissed, the whole city watched her. The prosecutor rose. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you're about to see is not just a violation of banking protocol. It's a window into systemic racism, into arrogance so deep it blinds itself to the truth." The lights dimmed as the projector flicked on. The screen came alive with footage from the bank's cameras. There it was. Daniel, sneering, leaning across the counter. His voice filled the courtroom. "We don't cash checks for people like you." The words hung in the air like poison. Cassandra heard a soft gasp ripple through the crowd. The video continued. Her calm face, the way she had quietly slid the government-issued check forward. And then, the moment the FBI agents had stepped into frame, badges glinting, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. The prosecutor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This was no random check. This was a federal transaction. Cassandra Williams was working with federal contracts. The check was 100% legitimate, but the manager's arrogance, his laughter, his assumptions, nearly turned a routine banking process into a criminal act of discrimination. Daniel's lawyer stood, voice trembling. "Objection!" "My client overruled," the judge snapped. One by one, witnesses took the stand. A teller who had seen everything. An FBI agent who had been present. Each word hammered another nail into Daniel's collapsing reputation. By the time Daniel was called to testify, his hand shook as he gripped the edge of the wooden stand. I didn't mean it like that," he stammered. "I was just following protocol." The prosecutor's eyebrow arched. "Protocol? Tell me, Mr. Daniels, where in your bank's handbook does it say to laugh at a customer because of the color of her skin?" The room went dead silent. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He had no answer. The prosecutor leaned in. "Exactly." "When?" The closing statements were delivered. The air was thick with the weight of justice pressing down. The jury left. Minutes stretched into an hour. The tension was unbearable. Finally, the door creaked open. The jury filed back in, eyes firm, expressions heavy with certainty. The foreperson rose. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." The words thundered through the room. Cassandra closed her eyes, a breath she didn't know she was holding escaping her chest. A wave of murmurs, gasps, and relief swept the audience. Daniel collapsed into his chair, face pale, career shattered. The same man who once laughed so freely now stared at the floor, broken. The judge's voice was final, almost poetic. "Let this be a reminder. Arrogance has consequences. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck again. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. But Cassandra remained still, composed, glowing with the quiet strength that had carried her from that first humiliating moment to this triumph. As she stood, her lawyer whispered, "You've done more than win. You've changed something." Cassandra turned toward the doors, sunlight spilling into the courtroom as they opened. Each step she took felt like history rewriting itself, dignity walking out stronger than it had ever entered. And as she stepped into the light, she whispered, almost to herself, "They laughed once. They won't laugh again."